Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my two co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole.
And I'm Joe Lalo.
All right, and we've got a return guest for you this week, somebody who always has some great information, Bryan Cohen. He's going to talk about how he relaunched his fantasy series last year successfully. And we're going to talk a little about podcasting, whether it helps. And he's, as the host of the Sell More Book Show, they report all the news, so he's got his pulse on the publishing world. So we'll ask him a few questions and prediction kind of things. But for those that don't know, Bryan, why don't I let you do your own introduction, since I usually mangle it anyway?
Oh, I wouldn't say that, but thank you guys for having me. So like you said, co-host of the Sell More Book Show that I've done with Jim Kukroll, not too much longer than you guys have done y'all's show. We're at episode 197 coming out tomorrow, which is very exciting. And we report on the news. I also am very recently a USA Today best-selling author. Yes, it was part of a box set. I know not everybody agrees with that, but hey, they're nice letters to put there. And I've published over 50 books. A lot of them are workbooks, so they're cheating, but it's been a really great ride in 2017 doing book descriptions for authors through my Best Page Forward business, my author copywriting business, and then teaching folks through my courses. But there was a lot happening last year, particularly with the relaunch. So I am definitely excited to talk about that today.
All right, very cool. And for those who may not remember or have not caught every episode, Bryan was back on episode 15 and 84. And last time you were here, you talked about creating better book descriptions and improving sales that way. So if people want to know all about that stuff, definitely check out that episode. I'll put it in the show notes. But for today, why don't we start out with the last time you were on, you were getting ready to launch a pen name in a fairy tale novel. So let me ask you about that before we jump into your series relaunch. I remember spying on the book, and it did pretty well. But other than the anthology, I don't know if you've done any more in the series. What were your thoughts on everything?
So this was one of those instances where I think I should have gone with my instincts, though my instincts were telling me to do more work than I was willing to do at the time. And so I knew the launch with a trilogy was the strategy I wanted to try with that. And so I had this fairy tale pen name, Casey Lane, that I was working on. And I did release a book in there, Cinderella Dreams of Fire, which, like you said, it did well. It had some nice launch stats into the top 500 and the Kindle store and all of that. And I thought it was probably the best novel I'd written to that point. I think that was my 7th novel at the time. And so you want them to keep getting better as they go along. So that was a good thing. But I think that I lost a little momentum because I was doing too many things at once, something we all have a challenge dealing with from time to time. And so I definitely should have tried to write 3 novels before releasing anything. And as a result, the only things I have that are solo to Casey Lane are really just the anthology story that I put together in a anthology that I organized called Once Upon a Happy Ending. And that actually did very well too. And so other than that, I ended up putting Casey Lane's name on a couple of co-written books with myself, with Bryan Cohen, including the relaunch, including a couple of stories that went into those box sets that we're attempting to get onto the USA Today bestseller list. And so I think I did a lot of things right with trying out a pen name, but I did not. I think that when you're relaunching a name, which is really just trying a new name for yourself with a pen name, use everything you have at your disposal for having been in the trenches for however many years. And if you're not ready to do it, and that's a lesson I think I used well in 2017. If you're not ready to do something, no one is forcing you to do it. You can say, hey, I'm actually going to do this in 4 months because maybe in 4 months I'll have more time. Not necessarily, but you need to be willing to pump the brakes a little, say, I'm actually not going to be able to put 100% into this, and say, okay, I'm going to push the deadline and everything is going to be okay.
Did you find with the anthology, what made you decide to organize that? Was that to help sales of the original book, or were you just hoping to get the USA Today letters?
So it was not a USA Today push with the anthology because it was just in KU. So I knew, for those of you out there who don't know that sort of thing, if you are only on Amazon, you will not make a list like the USA Today bestseller list or New York Times bestseller list because they require you to have multiple retailers reporting, and if you're just from one, they won't do it for you. Even if you're number one, but you're not on any other retailers, that you won't make a list. But for that one, it was an attempt to boost that pen name and a hope that, hey, maybe it'll make a little bit of money along the way too. And it actually has done really well. The anthology, we launched it in November of 2016, and with a year and 4 months of sales, it actually made over $25,000. And this was a collection of short fairy tales, 5 to 10,000 words, some big names, some not. And we really pushed the hell out of it and used we did use a lot of Amazon ads. We all, of course, pushed in with the mailing list in that first month, which was our biggest month, but it has continued to do well consistently. I have some thoughts on why that is, and a lot of that has to do with pages read. Certainly, if it was wide, I don't think it would have had the same kind of success.
And are you finding, because I think that was right about the time when Amazon, maybe this was just this last year, started tinkering and maybe not counting all the pages. If somebody like skipped to the last story in a box set or an anthology, did you see like a downshift in page reads? Because when that came out, I'm not sure if you were affected.
I mean, Amazon is still doing that. It's not like they changed that. We just reported on something that's you get everyone who's live here, you get the day early sneak peek. There are still people gaming the system in that way. Now, because Amazon is paying Kindle Unlimited pages read, it's up to the furthest page that someone has read. They don't have any special tracking other than that. It's just the furthest page read. So if you say stuff 6 books into a collection and say after the first book, go read the free preview of the next book and skip the next 5 books in your pages read up to that last section, yes, Amazon will pay you for that. And that is something that some authors have been using to really get a heck of a lot of money over the last year. And so that hasn't changed at all. That's still there. But I think that when you're doing an anthology and you, yes, maybe put a couple of the highest names towards the end, we weren't trying to necessarily game a system because that's kind of the way anthologies work. People are going to like the stories they like. When you have an anthology in Kindle Unlimited, then you really get to take the full benefit of that.
All right. Yeah, I feel guilty even putting like a preview chapter at the end of my books because I feel like someday they're just going to like bring out the whip and start flogging people. And I'm sorry, you're kicked out of KDP Select.
Well,
so let me ask.
Amazon flogs for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah. Well, you got targeted by a spammer, so you're out, or scammer. All right. Let me ask, because you are really busy with the business side and the podcasting and doing nonfiction too. And that actually seems like an easier way for most people if they want to quit their day job to, like, if it suits them, than just relying on fiction. Are you,
Yeah.
how are you finding it? Is it fun for you to do kind of the author services also?
I do like major parts of it. I think some of the most fun things for me are to take a book description, and now I have a team, and the person who is the director of content for Sell More Book Show, Abigail, is the co-writer for the book description service, and getting to take one of those book descriptions and turn them into something really helpful, and to see someone get a BookBub feature deal afterwards, or to see a real increase in sales, that feels good. And to be able to teach someone something that which a lot of the time is just, hey, your cover's really bad, like you should change that. And sometimes just being able to coach someone up in that way, and then they make a big change, that feels really good. But uh, it takes a special kind of crazy person to run multiple businesses at the same time. And running your own, I would say every pen name almost counts as a business. So Lindsay, you run a couple. I don't know if you guys have too many other pen names, but if you've got other pen names, you're running a couple. And so if you're running multiple pen names and a couple of side businesses, it is going to make it hard for you to focus on any particular one.
Yeah, absolutely. Fortunately, so far, Joe is just one person. I don't have to run the one
Yay.
business, which is about as much as I can handle, I think. All
Good.
right, so naturally, the folks listening to the show are trying to make it as authors, but there's lots of anecdotes floating around of artists who ended up learning they were better at merchandising than being an artist, and authors who realized they were better at being editors and authors. Can you
Mhm.
envision a situation where you would shift entirely to the podcasting or description writing or other, side stuff?
Well, I think maybe if I had if I was in a different business, maybe, because I think that when people see that I'm out there in the trenches, yes, I had a writing deadline too that sucked, and I didn't feel like doing it, but had to do it. People who I'm saying, hey, I'm selling training, or I have this service. I think people they feel as though I know what I'm doing more because I've gone out there. I've sold 100,000 plus books. They know I'm not just that guy peddling my wares, and so I don't think I will. Could I scale something back and focus more on one thing? I mean, that was actually my plan in 2017. I was going to quit the book description business. I was going to cancel it. The person who was helping me on those said she was moving on to other things. I'm like, great opportunity. And then this little voice in the back of my head said, there's still demand for this. Why don't you just raise your prices, and then no one will buy them, and then you can kind of fade off into the sunset? And I was like, oh, that's a good idea, Brain. Thank you for coming up with that. And so I raised my prices, and then sales went up. More people bought than had in the past. And so it's like, crap. Well, I guess I'm still doing everything kind of evenly, but I do see a future potentially of me scaling back, or to the point of growing my business, like someone like Mark Dawson, who runs training and writes a bunch of thriller books. He has people on a staff who help him, and he's even brought his wife onto the business. And those are some things I could see myself doing, so that I would be able to focus more on the certain parts of the business that I think I'm best suited for.
Sounds
Well,
good.
that was quick notice there. Okay. All right. My question is, I have to go back to your whole pen name concept here, because I'm just one person as well. Now that you've
Yeah.
written and released a title using a pen name, how would you rate the experience? Would you do it again?
Yeah, I would. I would. That's a good question. I would do it again. I would consider another pen name, but I don't know if I'm going to. I think that I've realized that I don't necessarily, at this point, I don't see myself in the next 3 to 5 years doing it, because I know I can put out books under my name. This past year has proved it. I can put out books under my own name and release them and have them do well for fiction and for nonfiction. And it's nice, would be nice having had some differentiation in the past with the pen names to make that split a little better for my my author also bots on my Amazon page, which are totally just, they just don't even make sense at this point. But they would for, you know, Joanna Penn and JF Penn, because she did it the right way.
Yeah, because that actually segues right into my next about part of that question is there anything you would do differently should you decide to do it again?
Good question again. So I would definitely do everything the way I said I was going to. Release multiple books at one time. I think that was really helpful for the relaunch. I think it would have been helpful for the new pen name, and particularly with KU. I think sometimes KU readers maybe have because they're inundated with so many choices, they have a shorter memory. And so you want to shorter attention span. You want to say, hey, these 3 books are all out. It's not one you have to get on a pre-order. You can get them all, snatch them up, and go from book to book. So that's something I would do differently. And I think I pushed a little heavy on the paid BookBub ads. I did that because I wanted to hit certain numbers, and I was doing pretty well on numbers, probably top 1,500, top 1,000 with Cinderella Dreams of Fire. And I said, no, I want a really cool number. Let's get a really cool number and add some more BookBub ads to my credit card. And hey, I was able to get additional sales, but was the return on investment good? It depends on what I was going for. If the cool number was what I was going for, yeah, maybe. But if sales were what I was going for and making money off of those sales, no, not so much. So those are 2 things I definitely think I would do differently with that particular launch and that particular pen name.
Alrighty. And I do have a viewer question for you from Edward. He says, Bryan, I know you pay close attention to all the publishing news. What, in your mind, is the biggest publishing stories of the last few months?
Thank you, Edward. That's a good question. I think that, of course, and I know you guys have sadly had experience with this personally, hosts is the Amazon taking the hammer to people and saying, oh, you know, shoot first, ask questions later. It really stinks that that's happening. I have made a case that it is our fault as a community because we said, fix this, fix this, fix this, fix this now. Do it nicely, but fix this now. But of course, Amazon heard fix this now. And so they said, giant hammer down, strip ranks away, ban people, hopefully temporarily. And that's been a big story, I think. Now, is it a story that should stop us from promoting our books, building our email lists, continuing to do the things that will help us to build a solid foundation? No, we shouldn't stop doing those things, of course. But yeah, I mean, that's been a big story. And I think the story that's going to keep growing and growing into 2018 is audio and the opportunities for audio and the non-audible places where you can do audio, like Authors Republic and Findaway Voices through Draft to Digital. These are going to be big things that I think are going to continue to grow. And if these companies can incentivize, as well as Audible with its $50 bounties for new people who sign up, then I think there is going to be some really nice competition in that marketplace that indies will be able to take advantage of.
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing some more competitors for Audible coming out there, and I hope to hear from some guests in the future that they're just really killing it on, I don't even know, Listen Up or some audio book service out there.
Yeah, something.
There you go. Like, oh yeah, I made 5,000 last month from them. It was great. So I'm curious, before we totally move on from the fairy tale thing, since you mentioned BookBub ads, how did you find they did for that? Because I found with my recent fantasy release, kind of Epic Fantasy and Dragons, they were super expensive to get the clicks because the click-through rate was really quite low compared to when I did a sci-fi romance last summer with my pen name. It was a lot more higher CTR, so less expensive clicks. So I'm curious how the fairy tale genre went for you.
Well, I tried to really curate fairy tale authors and push those. But I will be honest, at the time I was doing those, I did not understand as much about click-through rate as I do now. And I have on when I've focused on superhero books, I have very much improved click-through rate for a lot of those ads. But I probably the best I got for the fairy tale was maybe one sometimes, but usually less. And that's 1% click-through rate. So 1 click out of every 100 impressions for those of you guys who aren't familiar with BookBub ads. But those are expensive. Those are expensive ads when that click-through rate is that low. And so I learned a lot. And since that time, when I've targeted single authors, so not authors who aren't married, but single one author at a time, and made sure that those are people who I have seen results with, or I'm testing for a very short period of time and then kind of going forward on those, I will try that author out, see how it goes. And I have been able to get some ads with really nice click-through rates of over 3. I've had some that at times were over 5%, but as I added more money to it, I didn't see that as much. And I always almost use a very high bid. I have found, and this I've corroborated with some people, when you do a high bid on BookBub ads, you tend to get the best people, the best clickers. You tend to get those folks, as opposed to when you bid lower, you may seem like you're saving money, but I actually think that you're going to get a lower return from those, because it's just going to kind of spread you out to the low clickers. I don't have 100% evidence on that. I have actually been on 2 calls with BookBub because they said, "Hey, you're spending a crap ton of money on our ads. Can you tell us how to make our platform better?" I'm like, "Sure, can I get a coupon?" They're like, "No." So I suggested they give coupons to people in the future who do this, but I talked to them and they feel as though that is probably true, but they don't know 100% that a higher bid single author leads to necessarily better click-through and better conversion.
That's interesting. I always go with their highest recommended, like 12, 15 or whatever it is now. And it just seems like I usually take like 6 ads. I have my cover people, give me a bunch of different ones. Some are like free in KU, some are like 99 cents and different pictures so I can try. But like I said, I just really noticed the clicks, a lot more people clicking, and maybe it's just that the audience was hungrier and not as served as well. So I started out around 4% with the sci-fi romance ads, and I'm with the fantasy. I think I only had one that I got up to like 1.4% click-through rate, and the rest were like under 1. So I stopped those. And but I love your idea of just targeting one author at a time, because I went through, let me find all the epic fantasy people, that are doing well, and mostly indie authors, and just threw them all in there. Yeah. So you have no idea, unlike on Amazon, you've probably drilled down there and they actually show you like which author names in the keywords that resulted in sales. And one thing I noticed on Amazon was it was usually the authors I'd never heard of and that like didn't have great book covers and stuff. So like your book looked good compared to that author's book maybe. Whereas like Brandon Sanderson, they're there for him. They're not going to buy your crummy book on the side. I don't know what if you had any experience either way on those.
Yeah, I didn't see many successes with trad pub authors, but I did do some various crossover of people I was trying that, particularly with the superhero launch, which I know we're jumping the gun a little bit, but I really targeted the 3 or 4 superhero people who would show up, because BookBub ads will tell you, we don't have enough people to show this ad to. And you can still run it, and it still might go to some people, but it doesn't really matter. And so you're looking for people with, I think it says under 10,000 when you've hit someone who actually has enough people. And then it'll say like between 10,000 and 50,000 impressions expected. And so I will try to hit the people that show up. And then there aren't that many superhero authors, so I had to try slightly beyond that, a little bit into urban fantasy, a little bit into people who kind of are superhero but maybe not, and they don't market that way. And so I was able to find some more people there. I even targeted you, Lindsay, because you were over 10,000 people, so I tried that, and you were okay. You were only okay as a target. I mean, let's face it, but no,
People don't read about people in spandex. Come on, Bryan, you know
that's
this.
true. Good point. Good point. But yeah, I think that you have to do experimentation, and unfortunately, with BookBub ads, that means you're going to spend a few $100s even just to get a good set of data, so that you can have effective ads later. And so that's a challenge, and that's out of the budget for most people, which is kind of BookBub's MO a little bit.
Well, for those who want some encouragement, I've actually had really good luck with Amazon ads this time around with the epic fantasy. So sometimes maybe like genre dependent, maybe sometimes Facebook ads work well for people. Sometimes the BookBub ad might, sometimes Amazon. So yeah, it helps if you have a little money to play around. And I only do this stuff on a book one is on its own.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, since you've been podcasting for a few years and we've all been podcasting, sometimes people are curious, does this actually help sell books? And what are your thoughts on, both as a nonfiction person and do you think it could be useful for somebody trying to sell fiction?
Well, I think that in most cases, it probably isn't helpful. But I will say there is one way in which it is helpful. That is, if you are doing an author podcast for other authors, more authors will know who you are. So when I was organizing that anthology last year, starting in 2016, when I was joining a box set to try to hit a USA Today bestseller list, people knew who I was from the podcast. So that was helpful, I feel like. Now, if you do a podcast and then don't really connect with other authors on the side for within your genre, then you may not be getting the full advantage of it. I still have yet to talk to anybody other than the big, most successful, like Welcome to Night Vale and Lore, which I know isn't fiction, but it's sort of fiction-y, legend-y, whatever. Other than those big hitters, I don't know anyone who's directly sold more fiction, but I think it could certainly be helpful for building your brand and having more people know who you are as an author.
It's funny because my question has at the end in parentheses, "Welcome to Night Vale?" ? So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Means I'm not crazy. All right. So to sell more of your own books with a podcast, or to sell more books with a podcast, it seems like the goal would be to entice readers. And shows like this one and yours are obviously geared more toward reaching authors because it's educational for authors. Do you think that a podcast, for example, that reviews books might get to readers?
Well, I was actually part of a podcast that reviewed books, and from a reader and writer perspective. And while I think we could have done more to push it and get more readers of those genres, that was young adult specifically, to get them to check it out, I think it still would have been tough. It's still, I mean, like any podcast that you're creating, it'll be tough. Now, if you write nonfiction and you do a podcast teaching things, you're set. You can use that really well. It's a positive return on investment. It's, the Amazon ads that keep accruing as opposed to stop spending after $10. That kind of podcast can be a good earner for you. But I think that it's always worth trying something. The problem is, and Simon Whistler gave me this advice a while back before he retired from publishing stuff to be a YouTube superstar. He said you probably have to give a podcast about a year to know if it's really working. And so there may be other marketing methods that don't take as long and don't require as much input that could get you a better return on investment, and you'll know sooner. And so as a result, you will have a better idea of whether or not that particular method is selling more books for you.
And just so that we can understand why I had Welcome to Night Vale mentioned, uh, uh, to go hand in hand with audiobooks becoming presumably more of a thing for indies, serializing your fiction in the form of a podcast is this sort of thing that somebody might pursue.
Yeah, I think that Welcome to Night Vale's obviously done that extremely well. You should check it out if you haven't. It's pretty cool. They have Foley, they have all sorts of stuff that's very professional, and that is one of the problems. A lot of these serialized fiction podcasts, they're really high end. They're really strong, and it's easier than it ever to have a professional sounding podcast, but that doesn't mean it won't be hard. A lot of these places use voice actors in theirs, and so it's going to be a challenge. Doesn't mean it can't work. I remember, I think it might have been you guys who had on somebody who in the early days of free audiobook giving out had done extremely well from kind of a version of podcasting his own books. And this was way back in the day. I remember
listening. That was Nathan Lowell.
Yeah.
He got a really good start with his ebooks because he just started out podcasting and developed a huge following. He didn't even have them written down. He was just reading them and publishing them. He's like one of the first people to really kill it with indie stuff.
Yeah. And he was the first mover, and first movers always get the benefit of it. And so, I think that it's going to be a real challenge unless you are an author as well as an audio engineer.
Okay, so my next question for you, as was mentioned earlier, a great way for an author to get his name out there would be to consider starting a podcast. So what advice would you give someone, or let's say a group of someones, who would like to start one up?
I think having a different spin on things is always really helpful. I think something you guys have done really well is your science fiction and fantasy marketing. Now, that niches you down, of course, just like self-publishing news niched me and Jim down pretty hard. But there's nothing wrong with appealing to a smaller group of people if those people have the opportunity of being diehard fans. So should you go out there and do another author interview podcast? Maybe not. Maybe you add a spin to it. Like there's a panel of people interviewing someone like you guys have done. Maybe you do it so they're interviewing you every time. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of different ideas where you could put some spin on it. And Somewhere Book Show had the news spin, which in the early days of Self-Publishing Roundtable long ago, they did news. And so they decided it was too much work, which if something is too much work and someone says, ooh, I don't want to do that, that's too much work, that's like a point that you need to remember. That's like something you should bookmark, because if it's too much work for someone, that means, yes, it'll be a lot of work for you too, but that means not many people are going to do it. If something's hard, fewer people are going to be trying it. And so that's why doing something that's maybe more produced, or that's a weird idea that maybe someone hasn't thought of, is I think one of the best ways to start brainstorming for a podcast. And then, like I kind of said, be willing to commit for many, many weeks. Don't take off, and just be willing to go all in.
Okay, I do have a viewer question for you from Monty. He asks, what is Bryan's opinion of Kindle Scouts as a series starter?
Hey, Monty. If we're talking about applying to Kindle Scout and trying to win that Kindle publishing contract, I don't know what my opinion would be as trying to start a series with that. I think that obviously if it went extremely well, Amazon might want you to keep publishing with them the other books in the series. But if you are taking a series that's already existing and throwing a book one in there, that'd be really interesting. I don't know if it would work as well as just putting the start of a series in there or a solo book. But I would say that everything is worth a try. And I know that we're going to report on this next week. I know that Jim Heskett is an author who we need to send a jacket to because we mentioned him 5 times on the Sell More Book Show. But we've been giving out so many of these jackets. It's a real pain in the butt. We mentioned him because he just recently had a successful Kindle Scout campaign. And I think you need to look to the people who've had these successful campaigns and then message them and say, hey, how did this go? Did you start a series with this? What was it like connecting with Amazon afterwards? And that's something we don't do enough of. We hear that something is good and then we try it. But people are pretty open in the author community. This is one of the most amazing things I think about the indie author community is someone will try something and they'll write a blog post about it. But you don't just have to read the blog post. You can say, hey, Jim, how did this go? And usually they'll answer. And I know because I answer enough emails from random people to say that, yes, I answer a lot of random questions about all sorts of stuff. But it's worth following up. It's worth making that connection because who knows what it could lead to in the future. And maybe they'll ask some of their scouties. That's what I assume Kindle Scout people are called. They'll ask their scouties to go vote it up and see if maybe you can get twice as much man and woman power behind it.
All right. And Monty also follows up with, as he says, I am considering starting a web series covering the cosplay projects for a series of books I want to launch in November. Not strictly a podcast, but would like to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think video is huge right now, which of course means a lot of people are getting into it, but video can make a major impact when you're able to connect with someone more directly. And I think because you guys have noticed this, I'm sure you meet a person in person at a conference and they say, I feel like I know you because they've heard your voice. Some of them have seen your videos, and with video, it takes it to another level. They see you, all your good, all your bad, all your, I need a haircut really badly. And I think that if you are willing to take the time on the video and make it consistent, go for it. But try it. If it doesn't work, don't kill yourself working on it because it's so hard to do video. I tried to do a comedy video series back in early 2015, I believe it was. Bryan Cohen showing. I think I even might have mentioned it here on the show. And it was fun. If I may have kept up with it, it would have been okay. Probably shouldn't have committed to doing a video every single day because that was too much. But I lived, I learned, and I decided to stop doing it.
Yeah, daily videos are tricky.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you keep up on current publishing events. Have you ever seen anything, or have you seen anything recently that you felt like people were overreacting to, or maybe that in retrospect wasn't as big a deal as people were treating it like?
Only everything. Everybody is overreacting to everything, and it's driving me insane because I think that there's been a lot of negativity this year, and this is worldwide, this is publishing, this is whatever, whether you're hating on Amazon or you're hating on a person in the media. This is the kind of thing where it can really get your emotions going. It can get your emotions going like an angry radiator behind me. But and my neighbor who's sitting not too far away from me is sad about this. Do not worry. We are fine. We're fine. Okay. I don't mind the radiator. You guys will all live too. Because we don't need to overreact to things. We don't need to necessarily react to every single little piece of information, like Amazon bringing down the hammer a little bit, like KU payments when they went down for 5 or 6 straight months before going up for 4 consecutive months. everyone had a hissy fit. And I am tired of the hissy fits. I am tired of people who fuel the hissy fits with hissy fit comments. I'm tired of people fighting in comments against each other. Why? Aren't we all indie authors? Don't we all want to succeed? Don't we like each other generally? Like, this isn't the Thanksgiving table. We don't need to be angry at one another. We can just try to, put on our adult person clothes, our big boy pants, whatever you want to say, breathe, and then react to things like a normal person. We do not need to get so bent out of shape about things, because it will keep us from writing as well as we can. It will keep us from doing the work that we need to do, and it will keep us from making good connections with other authors. So basically, there's nothing good about it other than you feel good for 5 seconds before feeling terrible. So no more hissy fits.
It's a good policy.
Thank you.
All right, shall we move on to what everybody has actually been waiting for, hearing about this? Oh, well, my dog has not been waiting for it.
Your dog is like,
your
fine.
heater is nothing compared to the random barking that just started up. Well, why don't you tell us what made you decide to relaunch your series, and I'll see if I can
corral
my dog a little bit.
Oh, no worries. So I decided a while back that I didn't think I'd done as strong a job with my Ted Saves the World books, my superhero series. I'd written 5 novels out of a planned 7, and then kind of stopped it to move on to other things. And I didn't think it went as well as it could have. I sold a few thousand copies, and those were the first novels I ever wrote. So not too bad, but I think that I was expecting potentially more from the series, and I wanted to figure out, well, what was the problem here? And so I came upon the idea, and I've seen a lot of people talk about it on K-boards, on various other places, about relaunching. And so I said, okay, well, what would I change if I could relaunch? And I said, well, my covers didn't really work. They kind of struck this sort of grayish urban fantasy vibe, but young adult. And I didn't really want to push the young adult side too hard, because I know that it is sometimes more difficult to make it in young adult unless you're traditionally published, or you're really pushing that they're 18. It's kind of new adultish. And so I kind of wanted to go away from that, even though I'd done a photo shoot and it was super cool and I have good memories of the photo shoot. But I decided to totally scrap the covers. I had gotten some advice early on that my titles maybe were a little too punny, from Portal Combat to Veil to the Chief. Funny, but were they going towards a mostly not comedy, not people who look for comedy type genre of superhero urban fantasy? They like comedy in their characters, not necessarily comedy in their titles. And so I decided, all right, well, I got to redo the titles too. And so when you add all that together, I also said, look, it seems like Amazon gives a boost to books in their first 30 to 90 days that doesn't necessarily get handed out to books that have been out for a couple of years. And so I said, all right, well, I'm scrapping them. That means giving up over 300 reviews that I'd worked painstakingly to accumulate. And it meant planning out a new launch, just going from scratch with that. And so I said, let's go for it. Let's see how it happens. And I'm going to try to do it in the first 3 months of my daughter being born. And so that didn't work. So I took my earlier advice and said, I'm going to do it when I'm ready. And so in June 2017, I decided that was going to be my date. That's when I'm putting them out. And then I went for it.
Yeah, I've noticed with titles that the more clever I think it is, the less well it will probably sell. And not only that, it will probably confuse people because it's, like, if it's slightly literary, or in your case, it sounds kind of like a parody. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it might turn off people that just I want more of the same thing that I know I already like, and I'm not sure
Yeah.
what this thing is you're presenting.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me sneak in a Twitter comment here because I think it goes in. It sounds like you re-edited too, and Benjamin asked, I'd love to hear him discuss in more detail how he went rewriting book one. That must have been a daunting feat.
Thanks, Benjamin. Yeah, it was. I remember starting my work on a page one rewrite of book one. That is right. I started from the beginning. I did know what plots were happening in each chapter because I already had the book. And so I was doing a little side by side action. But I remember sitting up with my daughter Riley at about 1 month of age in the middle of the night with my phone out, a Google Doc. And while trying to rock her to sleep, or feed her a bottle, I started to add a line here and there. And it started like that. It started like line by line, totally going back over what was the first novel I ever wrote, painfully reading it, fixing it up, sometimes sitting down and writing full chapters, sometimes going just line by line and working on it as if I was kind of doing a huge editing project. And I took what was a 72,000 word book, and the new version was about 50,000 words. But I kept a lot of the content of what happened, so I didn't have to do as much editing on books 2 and beyond. But I did make major changes to how much the narrator was kind of getting involved in things, how much I was kind of waffling in between dialogue, and how much description I was giving things. I mostly cut to the chase, and most people seem to like that. I did get a few comments here and there, a few negative reviews that said I like the original version better, but that's not going to convince me. I know the new version is better because Bryan 3 years later is a significantly better writer. And so if you have a book one out there and it is the worst book in your series, that's a problem because no one is going to read book 2, or some people will, to be nice. But no, there will be people who go from book 1 to book 2, but you can improve your percentage significantly by being just saying, look, I'm going to take the axe to book 1 because I'm so much better now as a writer. It didn't help me that my book 5 was just miles ahead of book 1 because no one got to book 5. So you have to be willing to go back, look at that first book, and make the changes that are necessary.
Yeah, it's tough too if you want to write like an 8-book series. And, that's why so many traditionally published authors will fully admit that they wrote like 5 books before they sold their first book, because most of our first books really shouldn't be out there.
Yeah.
They're just, you're not ready yet as an author. You don't realize what you don't know until people have come and critiqued it and said, oh boy, you got some issues in this book.
And of course, some people have first book success, but they're few and far between. And so even the people who did have success, had a book 1 originally published, they will go, you see all the time, like newly updated for 2017 now with an editor. And so, yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, it's almost worse if you have success because then there's 20,000 copies of it out there. And especially we've had people on, we just had, I think Amanda Milo said she did it without an editor for her first one because when you're starting out, you don't always have money to pay someone. And if you happen to be kind of hitting the zeitgeist, I guess, or just a topic that's kind of underserved, a niche, you never know, it might take off. But then you can afford to have an editor, so you're good.
Yeah. This is true. This is true.
And I did want to ask that you decided, this seems like an obvious reason why you decided to do the new ASINs. You already mentioned it. so you could kind of start over with your launch. Do you have any regrets now that you lost all your reviews, or do you think that most people should do that when they're considering relaunching?
I think most people should consider it. I mean, Amazon obviously favors new books in the algorithm. And I think that it's rare to see a really old book get a boost without a significant infusion of money into it, or eyeballs that came from money. And so you definitely should consider that. I don't have regrets from doing it. I think that maybe I could have been a little more clear that it was a new book. I put it in the book description. Still had a couple people who said in the book description that this is a heavily revamped and re-edited version of something that was published as Ted Saves the World. And it didn't matter. I still got some negative reviews. Although I did have one really funny review. Someone posted a 1-star, like, what the heck? This is the same book. And I commented on it. Actually, it's totally rewritten. I hope you enjoy the new version. Kept the same review, same title, just changed it to a 3-star. Like, all right, fair enough. I can live with that.
Well, at least there was a change. That doesn't happen too often.
Yeah, I know. I was happy about that.
All right. We've got a question regarding this from Matt Ryan in the chat. Do you think it was any faster to rewrite the series versus just writing a new one?
Good question, Matt, and nice to hear from you. So I think that it was probably a little faster to rewrite the old one, but that doesn't mean it was the best decision, because if you think you're going to go out there and with a rewritten series, you're going to get 10 times the results. No, I knew that wasn't going to happen. I thought that it could double or triple what the original series did. And I would say it has at this point, in much less time. But unless you write in a very popular genre that, or, I mean, I could pick nits with that, but unless you write in a genre that can sustain a significant increase in income from those books, you probably could just go write a new series that's in a genre that could sustain a higher income and go with that. It depends on what you want. This was partly for me artistically, creatively, to see that I could get this series out into the world in a bigger way, because I really liked these characters. I knew superhero was not a big genre, but I wanted to try it. I wanted to see what I could do with it. And I've been very happy with the results. But I know that if I would have scrapped it, sat down, written lit RPG before it took off, yes, and I'm a former gamer, so I probably could have done it without screwing it up too much. Would I have made more money? Almost 100%. But it wasn't about the money. It was about seeing if we could pull this off and getting a little bit more money. So, like I said, not all about the money, but it could be a little bit about the money. So,
sure.
I don't feel like I said one or the other, but it's different depending on your situation.
Right. Well, if you're a professional author, then it's always at least a little bit about the money, because it's paying the bills.
This is true.
All right. So my question is, what sort of a budget is associated with a relaunch like this? Is it more or less what you would expect for a normal launch, or does it cost more or less than that?
I would say it costs the same. It would cost the same as a normal launch. The only thing that would be different is that if you're stacking multiple books around the same time, that means multiple covers. So I relaunched those 5 novels and then wrote the last 2 in the series really quickly. So that was 7 covers that I had to write or create. And that's 7 audiobook covers, 7 paperback covers. That's 7 if I would have done a full edit, because the last 2 were the ones I did a full edit on. The other ones I paid my something nice to say co-host in book descriptions. H. Claire Taylor helped me out with that one. We did a barter for that to cut the crap out of my books 2 through 5. But I think that if I would have been doing a full edit on those, it probably would have ended up being 7 edits as well. So it's something that it doesn't cost more spread out over a whole series, but I would recommend having the money saved up for it.
All right, you've already answered my next question, which was essentially what you typically do for a relaunch. So what I will do instead is ask on another one of our viewer questions. This one from Jonathan. He writes, I'm wondering if Bryan saw any benefits from adding his pen name as a co-author to his real name.
Great question. I don't think I probably did. What I had going for me was that I had created a fairly large Insta freebie list on that pen name. And so I was able to connect with a lot of those readers as my pen name to ask if they would leave reviews. I don't think I necessarily got a huge amount of sales from that. Maybe, maybe not. But I think that getting more reviews on the early Audible versions of these books, which I forgot to mention, I did have an Audible version of Ted Saves the World Book 1. And I decided to ask the narrator who I'd done a royalty split with if we could dissolve that and I could do a new version. And he said we agreed on a fee that would be fair enough for that. And I paid him, and I had another narrator do it, and it turned out they were friends who spoke on a panel together, and I didn't even realize that until I saw them in a video. But and I was happy with the first one, but I wanted to go in a different direction. I'm happy with how these have gone too. So that was another cost to consider in all of that. I just didn't want to completely skip over that. But yeah, so I think I answered that question mostly before I went on a tangent and then forgot what it was.
Yeah, that is tough when you're thinking about editing it. If you've already got the audiobook out there, that's one more thing, because that was probably, well, it sounds like you did a royalty split, but if somebody had paid thousands of dollars, for the first one or the first series, that I probably would not consider doing it just because I wouldn't want to do that over again.
Yeah. Now I did do per finished hour for this new version. And so that was definitely a significant cost because, ends up being $300 an hour or so, depending on who your narrator is. So the first 3 books were 21 and a half hours. So I'll let you guys do the math.
Yep. I am doing it with my pen name series. So it gets pricey. You have to decide if it's going to be worth it on the back end if you're going to make the sales. So you mentioned that the launch did pretty well, but maybe not as well as you were hoping. But it does look like you have good reviews, and they seem to be selling. I don't know that I stalk you that much that I know what your sales rank was before, but they're still under 50,000, and we're many months later now.
Sure, yeah.
How are you feeling? Yeah.
I think it went well. I think that, of course, you always want something to do incredibly well. You want something to make $50,000, $100,000, and you put in $5,000. You want the magic stuff to happen. The books have. I was trying to get all the books up. I think that I almost have them all up. It was like adding a book to book report, trying to remember my own titles while talking. But the series has made more than 3 times as much as the original series. It's made over $15,000 in sales. I have made back my money and more. Have I made a lot more? Not necessarily, but it's the long-term play. You have this, you keep advertising. I have a lot of Amazon ads going. Not necessarily spending a ton of money on those. I have some Facebook ads going with the Michael Cooper strategy of the help my Facebook ads suck longer form. I actually have an excerpt, my entire prologue as an ad that I've been running, and I have some really nice cost per click with one ad that could be, as Jim Kukral says, my unicorn ad that is performing well at about 11 cents per click. And I'm hoping I can keep ramping that up and continuing to have the cost per click stay about the same. So I'm sending a lot of traffic to that to that first book, and because there's 6 additional books, seeing some nice sell through there, running some ads to the box set of the first 3, seeing actually a lot of people download the box set audio as a result of that, because it's over 20 hours, which is kind of that magic sweet spot on Audible people who are Audible junkies like to get. So was it a successful launch that most people would say is successful? Yes. Was it a launch that I would say was successful? I think mostly. I think that you always have that hope, that 2% hope that it's going to just totally skyrocket, be ridiculous, keep book 1 in the top 1,000 forever, and you're making so many sell-throughs and so much Kindle Unlimited, and you're getting all-star bonuses. None of that stuff happened. But I think that you have to just hope for the best and do what you could do, and then say, look, it went well. I'm going to keep advertising it. And then we are going to just move on to the next project.
Yeah, it's kind of a double-edged sword with all the Facebook groups and podcasts out there and people posting their book report at the end of 2017, like it's inspiring, but at the same time, I think we all feel that comparisonitis that Joanna talks about. But I am reminding myself now, as I'm finding out how much people are spending on ads, that just because a book is in the top 1,000 forever on Amazon, it may not be just naturally sticking on its own. So, I mentioned before the show, I was reading somebody's AMA with erotic authors that made $900,000 last year, and they admit down in there that they spent like hundreds of thousands in advertising to make that. And that's fine. If you can spend $1 and make $1.10, great. But just looking in from the outside, you might just see their books are doing super well, and you feel yourself like, dang, man, I only launched in the top 5,000 and feel like that's not good. But if you're making money and if you're making back your expenses and making something for your time, it's nothing to be shaking a stick at.
True.
So let me ask you, since I asked you about the fairy tale stuff, how you feel advertising, I don't know if you tried BookBub pay-per-click for this at all, but kind of for the superhero genre in general, are you feeling people are receptive to that out there?
Yeah, I did use BookBub pay-per-click. I targeted some very specific superhero folks, like Tom Reynolds and Logan Rutherford and some other Drew Hayes, and tested to see which one was the best ones to keep pushing. And I think those went well and helped give me a nice boost at the beginning. I hoped that they might make me a little stickier in the top there, but they didn't, because superhero books aren't as popular as other genres. So if I do a new series, it would probably be pushing towards it would probably be pushing more towards a higher ranked genre that has less competition and more sales and all of those good writing to markets kind of things. But I think that Amazon ads have been nice. I think there's been more competition towards the end of 2017 that have kind of made some things like the product display interest ads a little more difficult to get a foothold in. And so I was hoping that would be a little bit more of a push than it was. But I do really think that checking off the boxes, doing at least a little bit of the things you've heard work, and putting a little money into it, budgeting for it, having the money available. Don't go spending money you don't have, unless you're making like Adam Croftian, like, crap, I need to keep spending money because I'm making $100,000 this month with this book. When he was doing his psychological thriller book, unless you're in that situation, probably just budget it out, try it. If you're finding that it's going well, you're getting a really nice return on investment, put in more. It doesn't have to be insane. obviously there's a learning curve with all of these things, but once you try them out a couple of times, you're going to get the hang of them, and some strategy is going to work for you. And if no strategy is working for you, maybe it's the books. If no strategy is working for you, maybe it's the covers. You go back to the basics and make sure the fundamentals are in place, then go back to the strategies and try them again.
Now, I got one more question regarding doing a relaunch. Obviously, we spoke a little bit about how Amazon can be fickle with their author shenanigans. So let's say you're doing a relaunch. Is there ever the concern that Amazon's going to, well, like you're reissuing previously published content? Are you going to get a nasty gram for a relaunch? And is there like sort of a, especially with a new ASIN, should you be waiting a little while from when the old one went down to when the new one goes up?
That's a great question. I think that for me, it was important to make sure all of my ebook versions were down. So those were all down. All of my paperback versions were unpublished, which still meant someone was selling a copy for $400 somewhere, wherever, whatever, that's fine. Which means those products are still up, with those reviews. But I didn't necessarily wait that long. I think I waited a couple of weeks, and I wasn't worried because I indicated it in the book description, and I wasn't worried because especially book one was so completely different. I think that I could have easily explained it away to Amazon, but if your ebook version is down and you publish a new ebook version, I don't think it triggers their system, because it didn't trigger the system for me. And my book 5 was almost exactly the same, but I didn't get any kind of, automatic thing from KDP support. So I think you give it a week or two and then you do it, or you take them down a couple months early and try to play it safer. But I don't think you need to worry too much about that.
Okay, and my final question for you is a second question from one of our viewers, Edward. He says, Brian, have you considered doing an audiobook for Audible exclusivity and audio dramatization for wide release of the same book? Or is the juice not worth the financial squeeze?
Good
That's
question.
a direct quote.
I like the financial squeeze juice line. So I think that for me, I was willing to put money into an audiobook production. It's just one narrator. So I don't know if I want to do a whole full shebang with multiple narrators or anything like that. But I said when I did this contract, I did not want it to be exclusive. One of the reasons I went with per finished hour is because if you do royalty share, it has to be exclusive. I'm pretty sure. And so I knew that even though I'm dragging my feet a little bit on publishing to Find Away Voices and Authors Republic and other places, I'm fully intending to get the books out there on all of those platforms, because 7 years is a long time. 7 years is the exclusivity agreement with Audible if you do the exclusive, and 7 years is not worth 15% to me. Maybe it would be if I made a whole crap ton of money on audiobooks like my friend Steve Scott and some other nonfiction authors are absolutely destroying with. But I think that it's not worth exclusivity now. If you have not seen a proven track record of a lot of audiobook sales on your own dashboard, talking about thousands and thousands, I would not go exclusive right now, because we don't know what these competitors are going to do. Maybe one of them is going to come out of the gate and just kill it in 2018 or maybe even 2021. But if you sign a contract now, you're down till 2025, which feels like a long time from now, but it will be how long your book is under contract with Audible.
All right, as I am sitting in exclusive contracts pretty much all around. But in the future, perhaps, now that there are some more options, I'll be also looking into non-exclusive. Just a couple more questions here from Twitter. Amber asks, and you already touched on this, but she's just wondering, when should you relaunch with the same ASIN to keep reviews? And when should you do like what you did and just completely start from scratch?
I think starting from scratch is almost always the way to go. If you have a very loyal base of readers who will go and buy the next book when you bring it out in this series, and they don't care what the cover is and all of that, well, then you might as well just you might as well just start over, because they will follow you anywhere. If you are kind of in the middle of a series and you have readers who will buy the book, but they're not so diehard that they would let you get away with these big rewrites and all of that, maybe you consider just doing it within that series. But I think Amazon is telling you to create new books by what it's favoring. And so you might as well play ball.
All right. And one question I don't think we actually asked you from Lon: when is it right to relaunch, and when is it good to wait?
Great question, Lon. Thank you. So I think that if you have a series outlet, for me, superhero wasn't as defined in its tropes, in its writing to market, marketing to market kind of tropes, as it was when I launched in 2014. I think that the covers got a lot more defined as what they are, which is kind of the silhouette with the bright background. That was not as big a thing when I first launched. There was only one book doing that. I think the genre is a little bigger than it was, particularly on audio. I'm seeing a lot of traction on audio, on Audible. And I see now that there are some superhero books with 3,000 plus ratings, which means over 3,000 people have bought or gotten a free copy of that book. So that means, yes, there's a lot more to tap into in the superhero market there. So you need to see, is my genre, is it premature? Is it mature? Which is superhero genre I would say is mature. Or, is it beyond mature? Is it, there's no chance I'm going to break into that thing unless I nail everything perfectly. I would say right now people are pushing for things like, if say you had an early lit RPG, I would say it's right on that border between premature and mature, where you could still probably make money on it. Say you're going for military sci-fi space opera, well, it might be a little beyond the point, but it could still be worth it because there's still money in that genre. So you have to kind of see, where's my genre at? And you have to say, is it worth it for me to push this now? If, say, you were doing a lit RPG book in 7 years and the trend has passed by then, I would say it probably wouldn't be worth it.
Yeah, that's a good point, to look at your genre and see if the potential is there for you to do well with a relaunch. And also, if it was kind of your first series and you didn't know what you're doing, you're like, I wrote a magnificent cross-genre steampunk sci-fi with dragons and superheroes, and I advertised it as such and nobody bought it, then maybe you now know, oh, I think I just actually wrote a space opera, and it would be easier to market. That's when I would say new covers and new blurbs for sure could definitely help out.
Yeah.
Ooh, and Lon had a third question that was not really related, but I thought it was interesting. If you had a series of shorts, would you expand them into longer pieces?
That's a good question. I mean, it kind of ties back to the serial days when a lot of people were trying to mimic that. I think that a better use of shorts might be kind of what I did, which was put a bunch of people's shorts together into an anthology. But you're welcome to try to stitch together serials or shorter pieces into something longer, especially if you've seen that the shorts maybe did okay but could have done better. If it was absolute crickets and zero, nothing, you might want to really revamp that into a novel. I will say, Ted Saves the World was originally a 20,000 word novella that I released in 2012, that I then turned into a novel in 2014, that I then completely rewrote in 2017. So you can try new things with a piece of work. It's yours. You own it. Do what you want with it. And then see what happens and learn from the experience and decide whether or not you are going to uh, keep working on that piece or create something new.
All right, that is the end of our questions, but I have to ask you, because I know you're here because you have this conference coming up. Let me first ask you, what made you decide that you wanted to host the Sell More Book Show conference?
So I think that being live on stage and feeling that energy and connecting with people who are in the room with you is such a wonderful feeling. It's probably just one of my top passions ever. And being able to do that, being able to deliver that on stage. And so the Sell More Book Show Summit is an excuse for me to get to go up on stage multiple times and do that and deliver that information. But in honesty, I had thought I wanted to put something together before potentially my wife and I moving out of Chicago in the summer, which is not in stone yet. But and so I wanted a last hurrah. So I was thinking of doing something in May. Jay Thorne and Zach Bohannon of the famous Authors on a Train that they did with Lindsay and Joanna Penn, they said, we want to kind of do a conference. And so Jim said, all right, whatever, because that's what Jim says. And no, Jim, of course, was excited because he'd done an event in 2015 and hadn't done one since. And so we all decided, well, let's make it all the same event. Chicago, May 4th through 6th. 2018, the Sell More Book Show Summit, where we're going to have a lot of great speakers, including Lindsay and Chris Fox and Brian Meeks and Monica Leonel. And we're going to have a 2-day, it's basically 2.5-day event. The Friday, we do a live Sell More Book Show. The Saturday, we have a full day of speaking. And then the Sunday, we stop a little early so people can catch flights and whatnot. But we've sold a great amount of tickets. We're hoping to pack the entire house with over 100 people. And it's going to be awesome. Like, I'm so excited about it. And this is the last week to get a lower price, the early bird pricing through Friday, January 12th. So that was one of the reasons I wanted to join you three on your lovely show. So.
Well, we appreciate that you gave a solid hour and 10 minutes of information before. I actually thought you would say in the introduction, mention your conference coming up. But no, I actually know there's a lot of people that are in the podcasting listening community.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize a lot of names on there that are coming, and I've had a few people email me and say like, hey, let's do coffee or something. So if you guys are going and want coffee, I love my coffee. I can go 3 times a day for coffee. It's good. I may be a little hyper when we meet. But,
sorry, Dusty. I'm just something.
Yeah.
All right.
I would have mentioned it in the introduction, but I know that nobody likes to pitch a lot, and so I didn't want to be that guy. And but I think that what we're hoping to accomplish with this is give people really the through line. I think that's sometimes what people are missing. They're doing a little email marketing here, a little writing to market there, like getting that string that goes all the way through from stronger production, through connecting with readers, through building that list, through networking with authors, through actually going when you get those first 4 steps in line, doing the marketing awesomeness that you guys talk about on the show and that we talk about on our show, getting that through line and that getting things in the right order, getting your fundamentals in line, that's what we're pitching. And I hope that sounds like a good pitch to people, because it's the thing I really would have needed when I was first launching Ted Saves the World. Knowing all of that stuff, having it in line would have made a huge difference. So sellmorebookshow.com/summit. January 12th is the last day for the early bird, and we do have a payment plan for folks who don't want to drop it all in one lump sum.
All right, great. And I will put that in the show notes. We are episode 165 here, marketingsff.com. And I'll also link to Bryan's books and his website. And for those of you that will be listening next week live, just want to let you know it's going to be an hour early. We're going to have Mark Coker from Smashwords on, and he asked for an hour early, and we said, of course, anything for you.
Yeah,
so
my fault. Okay, I said yes.
Yeah, actually, I let Jeff handle the scheduling is what happened. No, but thank you guys so much for listening, and thank you for lots of great information today, Bryan. You've come on 3 times and talked about 3 completely different things, so we really appreciate all the help you're giving folks.
Well, I'm honored to be here. It really is an honor to be here multiple times, and I appreciate you guys bringing me back on.
Well, thanks for hanging out with us again. We appreciate it.
Sure.
So long, everybody.